What's going on, workforce? Brian and Chris here, and we want to sit here and share our thoughts about the media tour, our gameplay footage, and more. Now, this is pre-release gameplay footage. First and foremost, it has not undergone final adjustments, so anything is subject to change, but we do hope you enjoy. Before we dive in, Gaming Kinda, Ginger Prime, Work to Game, you're going to find all kinds of content here. Chris, why don't you tell them what they want?
So obviously with the job action trailer, we got to see the big battle changes, but we were missing a substantial number of tool tips and how those abilities feel in context of each other. Even just an early build gives us some level of context on what these abilities feel like together. Some jobs felt drastically different. Other jobs, it felt like a natural extension of where they were in Shadowbringers. And I think for me personally, it really lined up well with the jobs that felt the clumsiest to me. The jobs that I didn't feel immediately drawn to were the ones that I felt changed the most. And the ones that I really liked how they were, it's like, oh, it's just more that thing. So overall, I think the battle things were done well. We started with a presentation from Yoshi P, and there were a couple of things that I'd like to talk about that he went over there. A lot of it was information we had in the past, some of it just in a new light. And then from there, we got to sit down and play Endwalker for what could have never been enough time. And we have just finished that. And I honestly don't know how many videos we'll get out between now and the 13th. But the 13th, you're going to find out right now, whenever this goes live. So right now,
be sure to check all the links in the description. We're going to have it curated for you so you can find each and every video that interests you the most. What's changed with each job? What do we think about the various controller like inputs? You can probably find that more from me. And obviously, like just general thoughts and details about the new jobs and the zones. And there's so much to unpack, and I cannot wait for you to go hands-on with Endwalker. So be sure to keep it to the description if you're lost, because there's going to be a lot of content rolling out, not just within our like a bubble, but within the entire internet. So we hope that you have fun, and we'll also have more interviews and all kinds of stuff brought to you here on the channel, and especially over on Gaming Kinda. So Chris has got a lot of coverage rocking over there, so be sure to check that out. Now, there's a significant thing. I want to start with what I think stood out as the most quote, the thing that really had me grinning ear from ear. Now, I don't have the quote written, but I was like, this is like an oh my god moment. Why don't you give the quote, and let's talk about that, and then we'll talk about our hands-on impressions.
So Yoshi P started with a very respectful reminder of, this is not perfect footage, and also a brief message to thank all the medical staff around the world for everything they've done, the ones that are playing 14 and the ones that are not. He wanted to thank them for all they do, and then he began the presentation in 3 parts. The first thing they talked about was that we have now crossed 24 million players. We've seen speculation at how much bigger than 22 we've gotten. We now know the answer is another 2 million in a very short time. And then he went over a timeline since 1.0, September 30th, 2010, and has talked about how now Final Fantasy XIV contributes to a major portion of profits and is considered a core part of Square-Enix operations, and that they will, and this is the part that I really wrote down the quote very carefully, spare no expense moving forward.
This has my 1.0 player. This has my veteran blood so excited. Yeah. They'll spare no expense. I think one of the things that we've seen, like like when you kind of have this Tale of Two Cities with the Final Fantasy XIV community, new players coming in. This is so exciting. This is so wonderful. And then over the course of expansions, veteran players mean like, yeah, like, but this is what we expect. And honestly, it's kind of, we've called it out. We've talked about it, in many ways, in many videos, just that like we're so lucky to get this kind of content, but because it is predictable, you can kind of like rest on your heels, but spare no expense. And coupling that, also saying that Endwalker is their largest expansion to date, and that they're already setting the game up again for the next 10 years of games service, tells me a lot. For me, it says that Square-Enix is really backing this. Square-Enix's common critique people say is that Square-Enix is ciphering money from 14 to work on project X, Y, and Z. That's why we don't have, A, B, and C. And it's like, I get that thought. You and I have talked about, like, we have no control over the money once we hand it to Square. It's up to their discretion to invest. And it sounds like they're making significant investments into this game and have been. And then that's going to, I think, continue to ramp up, as we go into 6.1. And I think that's really where all my questions start to lie. But that's just my thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he went over the whole timeline, and some of it just reminded me of times that I've been there, not yet aware of what the game was, because we weren't covering the game from the day I picked it up. At least I wasn't. You were, and so I wasn't covering it this way. So I was just paying attention to the part of the game that affected me. And one of the things that content creation makes me most thankful for is that I've become aware of more viewpoints as we've tried to cover those. And as members of the community have enlightened me to those, it's what caused me to switch to tanking. So like, there's a lot that has come out of that I'm really excited about. And he talked about the conclusion of the Hydaelyn Zodiac tale and how that was partially in part because he doesn't want players to get frustrated that it just drags on. We do have these patterns with the game. There's also times that it breaks the mold. There's times that it surprises us. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about, as he talked about Endwalker, and a lot of this was rehashing information we've either known for a while or more specifically have had covered multiple times this year. But one of the phrases that caught me off guard is that you and I are used to hearing each expansion, that first line item is that it comes with a standard RPG worth of story. But each time the story's gotten bigger and bigger. And so at this point, it's gotten large enough now that it actually said that it was bigger than a modern RPG. And it would be the largest amount of story delivered on day and date than ever before. And so at this point, we've moved to where, as an MMO, within that package, there is a game that is larger than a standard RPG. And so, we're getting 6 areas, we're getting new dungeons, we're getting alliance raids, we're getting all these things that we're used to getting. And we're very excited about what we've seen about those. But it's the scale that really impressed me here. As we see the Oceanic Data Center coming online, as we talk about Data Center Visit, it's the scale of all this that's just astounding. And what's exciting about that is you don't have to consume all of it. So if you only like 30%, the problem before is sometimes when a game falls behind, you're forced to consume 40 or 50%, which means you're eating something you're not as excited about just to get your fill. But now the game is so large, even if you only have one niche, that niche is going to be big too.
What stood out to me from that, and just from this presentation again, is then Yoshi also talked about the trust system, and he's got more information to share about trust, but he said 6.1 and later that it sounds like, and I, don't quote me on it, but it sounds like that they're looking to expand the trust system into previous dungeons, and that's essentially where obviously it's a part of the 6.0 dungeons. They've already made that. They're making significant AI improvements and more into that system. And we've long thought that this was going to be something that they would do in the long run. So he did say that more information is coming back, and they're going to talk about that in more detail later. And he talked about the strength of this. I even saw when they initially added trusts, several content creators saying that this is the death of 14 MMO. No, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. It wasn't us. But it was like other content creators saying like, this is it. This is the writing on the wall. You don't go and put a trust system in a thriving MMORPG. And what Yoshi P actually says is that it's actually contrary to that, is that he hopes that the trust system allows people to actually then start to open up and participate more of the social functions of the game itself. But this helps take away that stigma or that barrier, that anxiety.
Remove barrier was the phrase he used.
Yeah. And so that is, I think, a really healthy thing for the game itself. And so whether like you want to enjoy it, just as a solo experience and then maybe open up into the more social experience, I think he wants to give players that choice. Now, he didn't talk about this, but this is my personal hope that I was just watching the presentation and crossing my fingers for. I've long wished that we had a mix and match trust system in which that, let's say you and your, like me and my wife, let's say we just wanted to get on and we just wanted to play and we didn't really want to like be social, but we weren't solo. We wanted to still play in a duo. Like that 2 and 3 group size, I still think is a kind of a missing gap in that formula, because sometimes you just go in with your friend and you want to say, hey, okay, let me go and experience this in that way. So we don't know about that, but that's something that we would obviously have a question for Yoshi P in the future. But just regardless, stepping it backwards, I think will be a massive help in terms of how people engage with the game.
Now, it sounded like the earliest that they would even be talking about that is 6.1.
Right.
So do not expect that out of the November 5th live letter. At the earliest, expect it out of the first 2 live letters of Endwalker.
Yeah. I honestly think that's the right, like development-wise, focus on the Endwalker. Like you already have the engaged player base. That will become an advertisement, like a real big point and a selling point for us as we build new player guides. Like after the fact, like, hey guys, Endwalker, you have to experience this. And oh, by the way, if you want to experience it like just on your own, you have that option. So I think staging that as a future update is definitely the right call.
For me, I think that the trust system, in my opinion, has always been something that was not going to show its true potential until Endwalker went live. The first day that the Shadowbringers Trusted Dungeon matures to full value, in my opinion, is November 19th. It's when that early access kicks in and Shadowbringers dungeons become old. They become legacy content, and those of us that are leveling our characters from 80 to 90 are focused on Endwalker content, and people who are just getting into 5.0 through 5.55 for the first time don't have as many people interested in running those dungeons that they need to progress through for the story. Now, I don't remember if every single dungeon in Shadowbringers ended up being trust capable. I know all the MSQ ones did, but they did say explicitly.
All dungeons were actually MSQ dungeons in Shadowbringers. That's why we didn't
I haven't engaged much with the trust system. So
I haven't either. I used it a couple of times, and I was like, okay, I'm going to play with people because it's way faster. It's way faster. And they promised it would be. Yeah.
And if I recall, the phrasing initially was that all MSQ dungeons would, but this time the phrasing was all Endwalker dungeons.
Yeah, and
now,
maybe
it's possible all dungeons will be MSQ, and that's one and the same phrasing.
Yeah,
but I do think there's a slight change there that gives us a little more insight. That's the value of Yoshi stating things multiple times, especially when things have to be translated, is that sometimes the same phrasing coming through translation a couple of times gives us some insight there. So all Endwalker dungeons will be trust capable. And he doesn't think this is against the spirit of an MMO. He thinks that this is actually there to remove barriers and invite more people in with the hopes that they'll realize the value of playing with other players as they do that. They went into teleport costs today, and they showed like some are going down, some are going up. It's just going to help it be more accurate and more in line, and to kind of, he said, create a degree of normality. And this should remove the stagnation that's within that system, where slowly over time it just moves toward everything's 999.
Yeah.
This should allow us to, relative to each other, say, okay, this distance is considered short. Let's cheapen that. And this distance is now relatively considered the large one. Let's charge those top end players a lot for that. And for the moon, he said,
it's gonna be pricey.
It could be a lot.
But he didn't show us what the price was.
He didn't show us what the price could be. He did say, however, from an RP standpoint, it would make sense that what you would do is you would use a favored destination to go back and treat that as a hub. And yes, that's 2 teleports, but you would go back to a favored to get your cheap one and then go from there to little local areas, very hub and spoke. I don't know that X players will actually do that, but he did kind of imply that that would be helpful. And they encouraged us to clear a hunt today. And so that felt like, while there were no significant changes to the hunt system announced, they encouraged us to clear a hunt, and I think hunts with the teleportation, they encouraged us to run hunts.
Yeah, so, and we did.
And last tour, that was not the encouragement, was to run fates. And this time, the first thing we did was go clear a hunt.
And that was so thrilling. It was messy.
It was awesome.
It was sloppy, and it was so fun because everybody was just like, we had a couple of sages with us, and it was chaotic, but we got it done and we got it figured out. And it was so exciting to get that win. And we did it with 6 people, and we were told another group did a hunt and they had to do it with 7 people, and it took them 30 minutes.
Different hunt,
but in different group, but they did it in 7 people in 30 minutes. We did it with 6 in 20. So I was like, oh,
we don't hit like 30 minutes. I think some of us were still realizing mid encounter that like abilities weren't on bars. A few people switched jobs when they died. They were literally like they do it back to Old Charlea and then port back out and try to run and get there. So it was a lot of deaths among 6 people, but it was an immense triumph, and an A rank with 6 people was doable in the test build. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun.
They also had striking dummies, so a lot of the footage that you'll probably see from us outside of the dungeon that we got to run, we'll talk about that just in a second, is us like testing on the striking dummy, looking and seeing what's all changed. A lot of the time you end up spending trying to recreate your hotbars and then also account for like, oh, this is completely changed. And I think that this is a good transition time to talk about the dungeon, because we're going to go in deep with all the classes for you, especially kind of focus targets around the various roles. So be sure to keep it locked here on the channel. This will be rolling out within the next hour here. So just come and check back once you kind of consume more of the content. But yeah, we ran the dungeon. We ran it twice. And, so guys, if you don't want any spoilers, we'll see you in our other videos. So the boss here was the Magus Sisters as a part of this dungeon, and it builds up. It builds up to the final encounter. And how did you feel? You tanked. I came in as summoner, and then I played it as a black mage. So I came in like full on damage. But talk about your experience as a tank because we struggled with a couple of these
We
pools.
did.
Yeah.
We did. Curious Joy was our healer, and she is a healer main. Has cleared all the way through E12 on her white mage. Is planning on healer maining in the expansion, and she was on Sage both times because she still felt like she had more to perfect there. I went Warrior the first time, Gunbreaker the second. The second dungeon in some ways was cleaner, in some ways it was not. So like we were synced down because we're all obviously level 90.
Yeah.
But then the dungeon is not. That was the 71 dungeon.
I think 73.
One of those.
I
So
actually didn't even pay attention to the level.
One of the early ones, and so you were restricted from your level 90 abilities.
And it is freaking gorgeous. Anyway, go ahead.
It was stunning. As a tank, first of all, tank stance still there. Everybody's got a gap closer now. Everybody can just basically pull hard with these AoE combos. So you are ready to go, go, go. But it's still double and triple pulls the whole time. Things seemed to hit harder. Now we were synced down, so like I assumed my gear was good to go. It's hard to say, but like, and I'm sure we weren't doing optimal DPS. I mean, I literally was just dragging all my mitigation down to one bar to click through because I couldn't remember where they all went. It's a timed event, so it's like, let's just get in the content. So like mid pull, there's some times that I'm like moving abilities around because as muscle memory kicks in, I'm like, oh, that's where that goes. And so you're adjusting things on the fly, you're realizing some roll actions are missing. So like, it's not a clean experience, but it seemed harder than I remember Dawn Meg being at the last media tour. It seemed like things hit harder. It seemed like there was a lot more movement required. It seemed like there was a lot more going on. Everybody's gotten new gap closers, and you know, Scholar's got the like crazy sprint ability, and you've got all this stuff. And it's like, why would we have all that? There was a lot of movement for a dungeon. There was a lot of movement. So I don't know what this is going to do as the dungeons progress.
Yeah.
But every expansion, they say challenging new dungeons, and it always means so the same thing. If anything, in my opinion, I think Shadowbringers was less challenging compared to Stormblood at the time. I feel like it became more narrative and less challenging, and the challenge was added in the trials and raids, and some pretty crazy shenanigans in alliance raids. But like this actually felt like it punched harder than the first dungeon of Shadowbringers.
Yes, and that's actually one of to point that out. So if we compare it to our previous media tour experience, dungeon to dungeon, the trash, the regular mobs hit a lot harder. They took a lot longer to just beat down. Versus where the challenge I felt in the Shadowbringers dungeon was actually in the boss mechanics, where we had never seen some of these mechanics before. Here, obviously, we got introduced to some new mechanics, stacking mechanics, and things that obviously just build up on each other and on each other. It gets pretty chaotic. I hope you guys enjoy the footage right now, because we're gonna let that run. So when you factor all that in, though, like not only we just felt like everything hit harder, and maybe this is obviously in lieu of the the stat squish, right? Because while I felt everything felt normal, I felt like as a black mage and as a summoner, I was really being able to bring the pain. You can kind of see that from the A rank that we were fighting as well. I felt like I was able to really kind of handle my own against a lot of enemies as a black mage, which was exciting and thrilling. But the one thing I definitely noticed is that like you got to be using cooldowns. And one of the things that like you quickly found, you were like, oh, where's this on my hotbar? I'm missing it because we're so excited we're jumping in, and you were missing arm's length. And then it's like, oh god, arm's length, and that so using not because AoEs are all over the ground, but like these monsters and these pools, like it was very clear that
I needed mitigation.
Yeah, you definitely needed more mitigation. And then what's that? And then all of a sudden we started really kind of picking up speed and having a much easier time, especially once we started really understanding the boss mechanics. But we did get distracted by some boss mechanics because we were too busy focusing on what is it going to do? What's it going to do? Oh crap, we called it wrong.
Yep. Yeah, I was pushing Joy a lot harder than I would push a complete stranger. Knowing that she's cleared 12, knowing that she's a healer main. I asked her if she's okay a few times, and if I didn't get a response, I just pulled harder. Like, she'll tell me if it's too much. And so I was definitely pushing her. We had a couple wipes. We had a couple downs that didn't turn into wipes. Had some pretty nasty moments where it's like, technically we didn't wipe, but so it definitely seemed a lot more respectful of it. Seeing tank buster mechanics in a dungeon, seeing stack markers in a dungeon, seeing, things that were really teaching you got me excited for, when you pair that with the job changes being a lot about rewarding you for these finishers. Each job has a little bit different way of showing you, but it felt like each job really has some cool, shiny stuff that's only available if you do it right. And so it feels like the game might be moving in a direction that teaches you to play better, which I feel like last media tour, it was 98% positive, and my 2% negative was I feel like we're not teaching people to be better players. And this time around, I'm 98% positive again. I'm 2% negative again. And in the positive category is I do think the game is moving to being better about helping players that want to improve while still being clearable by players that don't.
Mm-hmm. I think overall I'm very positive. There's a couple of changes when it comes to certain jobs that I was hoping to see made that they didn't make. And we talked about it like with our group. So we played with Zumi and Curious Joy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I was just like, wait a minute, I'm drawing a blank. It's late at
This
night.
is our first time meeting her was this event.
Yeah.
First time I'd heard of her was when she confirmed she was going. So
we'll have all their socials as well in the description as well. So please go follow them. Awesome. It was so much fun playing with them.
So much fun.
But one of the things that I think everybody was like, one of the conversations we all had was like, oh, there's nothing, like there's no complaints. This feels so good. And I said, yes, it does. Like on the majority of it does, but I did not like Astrologian on a controller. Like I felt like Astrologian just had too much button bloat. Now, granted, this is a very condensed look. Again, not final adjustments.
You got to go so fast.
You got to go so fast. And so I tried to make sure that I focused on the casters, healers, and tanks. And all in all, you guys can look for my content, especially as it relates to controller guide stuff. That's going to be rolling out over the course of the next couple of days. But just pay attention to that. If you're a controller player, that's for you guys. That all being said, like Astrologian, I was like, I'm gonna have to put I felt like I'm gonna need to put the same level of work that I had to put in Summoner in Shadowbringers, where Summoner felt so good.
Oh. Summoner felt good, and the longer I spent with it, the more I was like, oh, Chris, you got to go to the next job. Like, you got to get through them all. I did get through them all, but like it was a lot of like Brian's like, I'm still on Summoner. No, you got to go. Because I was like, you know how it works. You're just enjoying it now.
No, actually, like there's changes that I kept making because I was like, I was getting it. So I spent the most time with Summoner, Sage, and Reaper. I feel the strongest of knowledge when it comes to like Summoner and Reaper. Sage, I would just wish I had more time. I tried to spend as much time as possible with Sage, and then and that's kind of where that goes. And then from there, I just, like I said, I hit every job. White Mage feels like White Mage.
It does.
It just, like, if you know how to do.
I don't think that's a bad thing, though.
No, it's not a bad thing. Why, like,
I don't want.
Why mess with the best? I don't know. Scholar, honestly, when we talk about the dungeon and just movement, I think that's that whole like team sprint thing, and it's not just a sprint; it's also a damage mitigation as well. Like, I can't express to you enough. It's massive,
an enormous amount of time,
and you're super fast. This is not Peloton. This is sprint. And Scholar, I was like, holy crap, that is going to be the game changer. I still hope, and we kind of speculate at some point maybe that we could see more changes to the Scholar, like roll down the line like we saw with Monk over the course of the expansion, because Scholar felt like it was touched the least. And I think no matter what, I think when people think of Summoner Scholar, all of a sudden Summoner is like bada bing, and then Scholar's like kind of on their own, like it's still like, we're still doing
so I feel like we must be 22 minutes in. Let's get to our 2% negative. What's the
bonus part for all everybody?
I think Scholar to me felt like the one that I wish they'd gone further. We still have two fairies that have no difference. A Scholar felt good, but a Scholar felt good before, so they didn't make Scholar worse. But I felt like with how much Summoner changed, Scholar feels like they ran out of time. That's what it feels like. I'm not saying they did. I don't know what's going on back there, but it feels like it could have gone further. As opposed to in the presentation, people like speculating Bard didn't feel good. I actually thought, now that we've seen it, the 3 songs, it feels good. Bard feels good. You're building up these 3 codas, and then you're burning them on a big finale. It feels like you're being rewarded for doing the right thing. Scholar felt like, no, I really do feel like, and then there's Sage.
And Black Mage feels like it's rewarding you for doing the right thing.
It does.
Black Mage felt very rewarding. Yeah. I really enjoyed my time with it. But to kind of like piggyback off that, I really struggled with Sage right out the gate. I think a lot of people, like, Sage is going to be very interesting for me to see how the community adopts it, because you're going to do damage. Like, Sage has a lot of, if you were like, I wish there was a healer that actually had more damage skills, the answer is Sage. Like that is what Sage is. And I'm excited for that. Like I honestly am excited for that. But if you're like, I'm not really in for the damage, like you're going to be missing out a key aspect of what Sage brings to the party.
You're also going to be told how to play, right? So like a dancer is told to pick a dance partner,
yeah,
and everybody wants it to be them. A tank being asked for tank stance, that tank is going to turn right back out around and ask why Cadian's not up, especially in a dungeon where it needs to be on the tank.
Yeah.
So you've got to have that Cadian up, and I can see it. And if that Cadian's not on me with a Sage, like I can already tell you, day one, the healer I'm most concerned about running with is Sage. There's a lot to figure out. There's a lot of moving parts. And like Joy is a talented player who is dedicated to doing this, over-leveled, over-geared in content, in voice comms. And when I get to that point in MSQ and nobody's done it yet, and everybody's exactly the level and might be under-geared, I'm a little concerned about that first pull with Sages.
Yeah.
I think Sages are going to be very tricky, as opposed to Reaper is very tricky, but you're being penalized in you don't get to do the cool stuff if you do it wrong,
right.
as opposed to a Sage, people are going to die if you do it wrong.
Right.
So both the new jobs are complex.
Yeah. Oh man, and Reaper, I tell you, right out the gate, feels good. And I was confused at first.
It's hard not to want to be a Reaper main.
It's very hard not to want to be a Reaper main. Well, and then also, if you guys probably have already seen with the footage, Hrothgar be wearing hats and helmets and whatnot. So I made him Hroth just because I was like, all right, let's test it out.
Reaper feels
good. Reaper feels really good. I can't wait to see how people kind of really, spec out the stats and the rotation, right? Because once I feel like I started to really understand it, I was like, yes.
There's positionals, and if you get them wrong, you don't get the reward. And if you don't get the reward, you don't get to do the big flashy section.
Yeah.
The flashy section is locked behind doing it correctly.
Which means I see Reaper having a high skill ceiling, and when you look at it, there's just going to be a big delta in terms of Reapers.
Yeah. There are going to be people who just get more of the bottom gauge than others. Mm-hmm. Combos now across the board feel like if a combo is broken, it's your fault.
Oh, 100%.
There are the content made me miss the combos. This is like Vuln stacks.
Right.
Vuln stacks are a sign that you could have avoided it and you didn't. If you are breaking combos, it is you now. Mm-hmm. Across the board, every single combo felt like it would hold its place unless you did it wrong. If I triggered into like a gauge type thing, if I trigger into inner release, it'll hold your spot. If I use my tomahawk, it'll hold your spot. Like combos across the board feel like if you are breaking a combo, it's you.
Yes.
Which I think really allows for you to, do what you want to do, but know that like the better you do, the more you'll be rewarded, and the content is not going to get in the way of that progression. It's your personal progression journey to go exactly as far as you want to go. If you don't want to be perfect at this game, that's fine. It will be clearable.
Yeah.
But if you do, there is nothing in your way of, I was doing it right, and then the boss mechanic made me break my combo. Nope. Yeah. It did not.
Which will be interesting.
It'll be so nice.
So when we talk about, obviously, like kind of when we do our Final Fantasy XIV analytics, where it's like broken combos, like that is not going to be a number that's factored off of boss mechanics of just like, that's just what happened that time. It was more important for me to put out damage than to sit here and like worry about it breaking a combo. Now the combo is going to hold. You can continue to do damage from a range, and then you can jump right back in and continue your combo. And here's the thing that I noticed about myself. I was so trained up in, I got to restart my combo, that I was breaking combos. And I was like, I didn't actually continue right back there. So that's going to be something that I think even veteran players are going to have to work on to be able to improve upon, because yes, they've been trained this whole time that, your combo's broken. Okay, what about it? But now they can go right back in where they left off. And that's going to be real telling when it comes to the Final Fantasy XIV analytics once all that gets updated and Theorycraft.
And in general, things like in a release, these damage windows, they seem like they've moved to charges, not durations. And so what that allows for is you to get the number of fel cleaves you're designed to get, not, let me create a factor of how much skill speed I have plus how much latency I have. Like, no, you're going to get your fel cleaves. Those are charges, and you have a big, long duration to use them up. The sooner you use them up, the sooner you can get to building the next one. But, everything feels charge based. I will say my one concern with Warrior as a Warrior main is having the gap closer be off the gauge does feel good, but I am a little bit bummed that we had to homogenize the beast gauge to get there. I'm just against homogenization across the board. And the warrior gap closer and everybody else's gap closer getting longer, and the warrior gap closer going off the gauge and going to charges, it does feel dangerously close to gap closers just being a roll action. It does not feel nearly as much of a personality item.
Counterpoint, though, is that I felt like the warrior felt the most beastly
of the tanks.
And, it did. And I don't know if, like, me telling you this, and you haven't played warrior yet, right? But when you do, I would love to know if you have the same kind of impression, because literally it just felt like a beast tank, and I felt like it felt way more different from what Dark Knight is, where in Shadowbringers I felt like, well, Dark Knight for me was the clear winner. I don't know why I need to be over there on warrior, and so that I felt like the changes alone were
because
really
the story
nice.
was about us.
Yeah. Or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, hopefully you understand what I'm like. I was just saying, like, I'm excited to see the fact of what they've made with warrior, because it did feel thematic to the job, like in how it did.
It felt berserk. It felt berserk the entire time. I felt like there were Felcleaves popping up everywhere. It felt frantic. I will tell you, as a healer, giving me 3 gap closers off the gauge, if I have to get out of something, there were times where we were fighting the 3 sisters and I was running out of one thing and then dodging out of the next mechanic by gap closing on a different portion of the boss and then gap closing somewhere else. I felt like the new monk thing where I was just jumping around. I'm jumping to the next pull. So, like, as a healer, thank God we had somebody who's comfortable being a healer main, because whether Joey is like, oh my God, that Chris guy just kept pulling. Like, I was like, yeah, Warrior's like, okay, and to the next one, and to the next one. Like, it feels fast. So I do think it's overall a positive change, but I'm just bummed that the homogenization is kind of a side effect of that.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like the gap closers across the board are all roughly identical now. And just in general, I wish they'd somehow been able to have a little more personality, at least in the way that, like, the Invulns do, right? Like, Super Bolide feels very, very different than Holmgang, even though they do the same thing.
Yeah.
The gap closers don't feel like they've established that personality. They do feel very, very similar when I was switching between tanks now. And I don't know how that works. Like, there was something about, so like the Reaper gap closer, there's something cool about you jump out and your ranged ability has a cast time unless you've just used the jump out. So if you have to jump out of a mechanic for uptime's sake, you jump out, you instant cast, you jump back in. That felt so good. And so I don't know if the tanks need to find some way, not copying that, but some way of making their gap closer tie into something else if you can't put the personality there. But I do feel like, just in general with this expansion, the tanks feel a little closer together on that one element. And that kind of was something that I didn't really like. Provoke was acting a little goofy on the development build. And so if I went down, I was having trouble reestablishing threat. They had noted that they already knew that Provoke seemed to be behaving oddly on that build. So it just felt like, so that the neat thing there is I was like, well, man, I feel like tank stance is turned off. We gotta get back on this threat because I don't have Provoke if I go down. But I do agree with you. Overall, while Warrior, I'm bummed that it felt like the tanks kind of got in line. Overall, Warrior feels way more of a warrior. And I was bummed that the dungeon didn't let me use my max level ability, because that max level ability on the dummy honestly makes me go Felcleave who. Like, holy crap.
Well, now that I think we're getting close to our 33 minutes later, we do plan to talk about the tanks, the healers, the casters.
In more detail.
More detail. Now, Chris actually went hands-on with the range, more with Bard and the melee. I was able to play Reaper, so we're going to break up that discussion a little bit, but you can also be sure to go follow Gaming Kinda. Also check the links in the description of this, or follow us on Discord. Like, again, there's just going to be a lot of content for you guys today. Hopefully you are enjoying it, and we wish you all the best. Thanks for hanging out with us, whether you're at work, on your way to work, or on your way home, and you're excited about Endwalker. We can tell you hands down that leaving, and I think I speak for both of us, I'll let Chris kind of like counterpoint it if needed, but when we left Shadowbringers, we were like, holy freaking crap, this is incredible. I'm walking out of Endwalker going like, this is absolutely everything that I was hoping it would be. I think it was incredible. I am more excited about what this expansion is going to deliver on the 19th, and then the future is bright. You know, like the fact that Square Yoshi P entered in with, we're going to spare no expense, that tells me like, okay, great. Like, we're looking at a 10-year roadmap. Yoshi P's the captain. I'm on board. What do you think, Chris?
I think walking out of the Shadowbringers one with people feeling, some people felt mixed about Stormblood. we were seeing is there's no way this is as good as the media tour makes it seem. And then on the other end, people are like, oh, maybe it is. My concern across Shadowbringers is that I have said multiple times, Shadowbringers will likely go down as one of the best expansions I ever play in an MMO. And Endwalker and Beyond can be perfectly great games that I enjoy quite a bit, and they do not have to be as good as Shadowbringers. And I was concerned, how do you live up to what Shadowbringers is? And everything we've seen today tells me, don't rule that out. Don't rule that out. I'm not promising this will beat Shadowbringers. I'm really interested to see how you transition to a new story with 6.1. People are like, oh, I'm excited about Island Sanctuary. We don't know anything about Island Sanctuary. So there's still a lot of like, what is it? And obviously with all the server things and all of that, there can be a slight taint put on some people's experience, who can't get in. We've had times where various data centers have been locked to character creation, things like that. So there can be things that can put a bad taste in some players' mouths, depending on their point of view, and those are valid. But while I cannot say Endwalker will be better than Shadowbringers, it is nice to be able to say that I also cannot say it won't. And that's the most I can do. That's the most you can do with a game that we haven't seen the whole thing, is I just want to know for a fact that we can't rule it out. This looks unbelievably positive.
Guys, if you're also curious and you want to come ask questions in real time, Chris is going to be breaking down the video footage of us over on Twitch. He's going to be hanging out live on Twitch as well. So whether you want to go watch some pre-recorded videos, you want to go hang out with him while he's live with the stuff, I think that's going to be really exciting to see. So just note that's something that we have for you here today, and probably for the next couple of weeks going forward, especially with all the other content creators putting stuff out. So guys, welcome to the final countdown for Endwalker. Chris, why don't you take us out and we'll go do our other videos.
Guys, I am probably live when you are watching this because I'm going to be live as much as humanly possible. So come hang out, come say hello as we count down what at the time this goes live will be just over a month to go until early access. Very, very excited. Cannot wait for you guys to enjoy the number of videos that we publish. I don't know how many will get done in the amount of time between now and the 13th. So you'll know more than I do as of now. I'm really thrilled to share it with you, and we will see you in the next one and the one after that.
Take care.